How's that? Okay, so we're talking about the end times. Before we start with this homily, let me just say what we're going to talk about next month. Is there's 4 places in the Word where it says the Afrikaans is who's properly bilingual, good bilingual. Andy. The Afrikaans says dit behaag die Here. What's the English of that? It pleases the Lord. There's 4 places in the Bible. Oh, also good. 4 places in the Bible it says it pleases the Lord. And I think we read over those things. We don't take note of it. What 4 things in the Bible pleases the Lord? And then there's 4 verses that says it brings sorrow or it breaks God's heart. Also 4 things. And we're going to look at those 8 points. 4 things that pleases the Lord, or 4 things that breaks his heart. Because I think for a good relationship with God, we need to know those things. Very important. So that we'll do next next month. Okay, let's start today. Now, let's set the stage for the message I want to give you today. The second reading we just had, I'm going to read for you again, Matthew 24, 23 to 24. It says, if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there is the Christ, do not believe him. For many false Christs and false prophets will appear, and they will give signs and wonders as to lead astray, if possible, even the chosen of God. Now, when we read the word Christ here, we must understand what the word Christ means to the Jewish audience that Jesus had. This is part of the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 22 to 26, where Jesus is next to the temple with his disciples. It's close to the time of Easter, where he will be crucified or Passover, and he speaks to them about the end time. The end time. Now, I know a lot of Christians, when you say the word end time, they roll their heads because it's been said so often. But as I said to you many times before, I do believe we are in the end times. If it's the last 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, I can't give you I can't quantify the time, but we're definitely in the end times. And the reason I firmly believe it is one of the main points of the end times is the apostasy that we'll be seeing in the Christian church. You know what apostasy is? The falling away of Christians. And I don't have to tell anybody here today that we live in a time where churches are running empty, where communities are changing from Christian to secular. Anybody that has family or friends or go to Europe regularly will know Europe is a post-Christian continent. Where it used sometimes, at least until 100 years back, used to be the epicenter of the Christian faith. I think the last statistics I read, but I have shared it with you, but I will again, of a census that were taken in the UK of natural-born Brits, not all the immigrants, natural-born Brits. I think it was like 37 or 35% of people still confess being Christian. 1 out of 3 British people confess being Christian. 1 out of 3. And that's a nation that 100 years back evangelized a third of the known world. And now they're 1 in 3 think they're Christian. So the apostasy, we're definitely in the end times. And it says many Christs will appear. Now tell me, what is the word Christ or Christos in Greek? What does it mean? We must understand what Jesus is saying here. What we as Christians know in our Christianese language, when somebody say Christ, it refers to Jesus of Nazareth. But what does the term Christos in Greek just generally mean? He who is rubbed or anointed with oil. So who was anointed with oil in ancient times? Kings, priests, prophets, generals, people of fame, and people who could bring a form of deliverance or improve your living conditions. They were the generals that fought the wars, and the priests and the prophets and the kings that rule well. So when Jesus says many Christos, many Christs will appear, what he's saying is not necessarily religious leaders, but people who tell you, I have the answer for all your problems. I have the worldview that will make the difference to your life that you are seeking. Many of them will appear, and we're living in such a time. You can just put on the TV and you'll hear every second person telling you this is the way you should think, this is what is the real answers to your life. He said, and many of them in the end time of these Christos, these Christ, will do, have you heard that? Have you took notice what was said? Will be able to do great signs and miracles. Have you ever pondered on that? Jesus doesn't say false miracles or pretend signs. He says they will be able to do signs and miracles, which means we're entering into a time where some individuals on public stage will be able to do supernatural things. Jesus' own words. He says, verse 25, behold, I have warned you before the time. And what really worries me, it says in verse 24, the last part of the sentence, and if possible, these Christos, these Christ, these deliverers will even deceive the who? The unbelievers. The elect, the chosen ones, the deeply religious Christians, which I hope is us sitting here. He said even they will run the risk of being deceived by these false Christs. And why will they be able to be deceived? Because of a lack of knowledge. Only reason. Let me take you to the book of Hebrews, chapter 5, verse 13 and 14. Now, the author of Hebrews, it might be Paul, it might be someone else. It says, and he's speaking to believers, he says, for everyone that is still drinking milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness. He's still a baby if you only drink spiritual milk. But strong meat belongs to those who have matured and knows the difference between right and wrong. Now, it's no news to you. You know, you've often read scriptures or heard scriptures that speak about being a spiritual infant, drinking milk, and becoming mature to have a steak. Now, you all know you can't give a two-day-old baby a mouthful of steak, can you? No, they'll choke on it. You need to give them milk. Sadly, most Christians stay babies in their knowledge and their dedication. They never grow up to a point of maturity where they can have a steak for lunch. Can you give those babies steak yet or not? No. Not yet. No, they're not grown up enough. They're not soft food. So that's our first problem, guys, is we need to become mature in knowledge. How do you become mature in knowledge in your Christian faith? Read the Bible, read this book, know this book, dust the dust off, and read the book. Because I think Christians, even with good hearts, will be deceived in the end times by those performing miracles because they don't have knowledge. I've said it to you many times before. I'm going to keep on repeating it to you. If you're an expert on who's a well-known painter, let's say Michelangelo's paintings. If you're an expert and they call you in to decipher whether a painting they think is Michelangelo's painting, to say whether it's a fraudulent copy or the original, what knowledge must you have to know it's a fraud?
Knowledge of the original.
Extensive knowledge of the original art technique and his techniques. Again, if you don't have extensive knowledge of this book, you won't be able to eye a forgery and nonsense. Okie dokes. It says in Isaiah 5, and I love this. When did Isaiah live? Who can remember which century did Isaiah, son of Amos, live? One of the major prophets. Yeah, about, depending on the sources, 600-700 BC, there around. Yeah. So you're both pretty close. Good. Give or take 100 years. You're close. Depending on the authorship, because Isaiah lived in the time of the Assyrian exile of Israel. Hey, and that happened in 722. Okay, so the prophet Isaiah says in chapter 5, listen to what he says. And if it isn't today, I don't know what to say. It says, and this is one of the accusations God brings against Israel. Woe to you, for we live in a time where you call evil good and you call good evil. You'd say darkness in light, and you look at light and you call it darkness. Isn't that the times we're living in? With so many things that most of us, my age and older, things we stood for as right and correct are now being called evil, judgmental, unaccommodating, hateful. We're living in an era where everything that's good is called evil and vice versa. 2 Thessalonians 2, it says, Paul writes, end times, the 1st and 2nd Thessalonians has a lot to do with the end times. He said, and then shall come the worker of iniquity, working the work of Satan with power and signs. He's talking about the Antichrist, the worldwide leader. Again, you see with signs and powers, not with fake. The Antichrist, when he appears, will be able to do miracles. That's what people don't realize. And he, with all deceitfulness of unrighteousness, he will cause many to perish because they don't have love of truth. They're not equipped with knowledge. So that's why I'm sharing this with you this morning, that you are equipped with knowledge. Proverbs 19:1. Oh, sorry, my nose is itching. You know what it means when your nose is itching? So jy gaan jou vererg vir iemand. Proverbs 19:1 says, zeal without knowledge is no good. And sadly, we find so many Christians today that has an honest heart for God, but they have no knowledge and insight to back it up. And they will be deceived. Okay, let's go on to the next point. So now you understand why it's important to talk about these things. Let's go to the time of Noah. Who can tell me who Noah was? Shipbuilder. Yes, it was a big ship, hey. Very big ship. How long did Noah build on that ship? 100 years. That's persistence, hey? 100 years he built on the ship. Now let's read what Jesus said about the time of Noah. He says in Matthew 24, he says, but the day and the hour knows no man. Jesus, again, Olivet Discourse, speaking to his disciples about the end times and the return of the Son of Man. Who's the Son of Man? Jesus. But the day and the hour no man knoweth, not even the angels in heaven, only my Father. And let me just interrupt myself there. A lot of people who critique the Bible and question Jesus' divinity will say, ha, see there. Jesus didn't even know when he's going to return. You want to tell me he's God? They don't understand the context of this statement. There's a beautiful thing you must all remember, I've told you before. The Bible was written for us, but not to us. Does it make sense what I'm saying? It was written for all Christians of all times, but it was written to the first century believers. So it was in their cultural reference framework that the Bible was written. It's written for us, but not to us. We once read an author saying it in this way, which I thought was interesting. He says, we are reading all these letters and documents over the shoulder of a first century Jew or Greek man reading it. Meaning we must understand to whom it was written, so we can correctly interpret it. Now, in John 16, when Jesus says, I'm going away, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and when I'm finished, I'm coming back to get you. You know that that's a marriage statement, hey? Because a groom would say to his bride, I'm going away. I'm going to build a room or two onto my Father's house. When it's finished, I'm coming back to get you. That was a marriage statement. To say, I don't know the time I'll return, only my Father knows it, is also a marriage statement. Because who was the person that said to the groom, the room is now fine, you can go and collect your bride? Who was that? The Father. So this statement, I honestly believe, was not Jesus saying he doesn't know when he's returning. He's God incarnate. It was a marriage statement that the people of the time would have understood in context. So no one knows the time except the Father. But as it were in the time of Noah, so shall it be when the Son of Man returns. For as the days were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day of Noah entered into the ark, and from the reading my brother did, is the people of the time didn't expect what was going to happen. I don't want you guys not to expect what was going to happen. Okay, now if I asked you what does the time of Noah mean more than just eating and drinking and marrying and having fun and socially enjoying yourself, what does the time of Noah mean? You probably would first say, oh, well, the flood. There was a flood in the time of Noah. But did God not promise something after the flood? What did God promise after the flood? Yes, he gave the rainbow, hey, in the sky, that he will never again destroy the whole world with a flood. So we cannot make this deduction that the time of Noah that will return shortly in our life, maybe our lifetime even, has something to do with a flood, because God promised it won't happen again. Interestingly enough, God made the covenant with men and with the animals. Have you ever picked that up? In Genesis 9, the covenant was with man and with animals. God made a covenant with animals. That's one of the reasons, side note, some of you will not agree with me, Judy, but that's why I believe animals go to heaven and they have souls of their own, their unique way, because God made a covenant with them. How will he make a covenant with soulless creatures? But in any case, so it's not the flood that's going to return. So what else will return that's like the time of Noah? And what preceded the time of Noah? What happened? Evil, yes. Let's elaborate on that evil. What happened? The Nephilim. Who knows? Who can tell me what the Nephilim are?
The angels marrying the giants. People.
Giants? Yes? Angels?
Angels came down and
With the humans.
They bred. Let's use the word bred. They bred with human women and had offspring. Yes. The time of the giants, the Nephilim is the Hebrew word. Now, Nephilim comes from the root word nephesh, which means rotten. It wasn't nice. The offspring wasn't nice beings. Here's my take on it. And please bear with me. Here's my take on it. God created human beings and animals. Well, you might say, okay, animals doesn't have souls, but God created human beings. It was a sanctioned beings that came into life, humanity. So when a human dies, your spirit either goes to the positive place or the negative place. God sanctioned it because it's his creation. God never sanctioned Nephilim to be created. It was the rebellious angels. The book of Enoch called them watchers. And I know the book of Enoch is not gospel, but there is one or two interesting things in the book of Enoch. And just for interest's sake, is the book of Enoch anywhere quoted in the Bible? In Jude. The author Jude actually quotes from the book of Enoch. So I won't read Enoch as gospel truth, but it's very insightful when you read the book of Enoch. He calls them the watchers, angels, that came down in rebellion against God and interbred with humanity, and they were offspring, spiritual, physical offspring that, in my opinion, God never sanctioned, the Nephilim. And they were evil and wicked beings. And that was the primary contributing factor to the flood. God had to eliminate the genetics of the Nephilim from earth. Why? Because at some point in the future, his son had to incarnate through a human genetic line. And that line could not be compromised. That's why he took Noah, a man of righteousness, his three sons. Who were Noah's sons' names? Japheth, Ham, and Shem. Those are the three sons of Noah. Now, you know Shem was the Shemitic nations. That's the Jews and the Iranians and the Persians, all the Middle Eastern nations, including the Jews. Then Japheth is the Europeans. Hey, Japheth is the Europeans. We are Japheth, from the Japheth line. And then there's the line of Ham. And Ham's son, Canaan, was cursed by Noah. Do you remember that story? After they all got out of the ark, what's the first thing Noah, this man of righteousness, did? He planted grapes for wine. So, he got intoxicated with wine. And it says, Canaan, or Ham's son Canaan, Ham saw his father's, what's the exact words? Revealed his father's nakedness, or saw his father's nakedness. Again, which is a cultural statement that has different potential meanings. And what did Noah do when he realized that? He cursed Ham's son, Canaan. Now, there's some scholars believe that Ham's wife, remember 3 sons, took 3 wives with them, that she carried the Nephilim genetics. And that's why her offspring with Ham was cursed. Just a theory, but it's an interesting theory. Because some genetics had to survive.
So what do you mean when they saw Noah naked? What did you
Or
say?
they uncovered his father's nakedness. That's the exact word.
His true self. Or what?
Well, there's 3 different interpretations, or 3, yeah. 2 I remember. Firstly, he saw his father physically naked and laughed about it. He was disrespectful. That's probably the most obvious one. The second one, the term to unreveal a man's nakedness, actually meant sleeping with his wife or molesting his wife. So some scholars believe that Ham actually molested his mother. And that was why also he was cursed. So there's different interpretations about that statement. But in any case, why do I say the Nephilim genetics had to survive? There were Nephilim later on in Israel. Do you remember Goliath and his brothers? They were giants. Okay. Now, just off my point, I just want to share with you the following. Where does demons come from? Have you ever thought? Because God didn't create demons. Elaborate? Elaborate? Good. No. Okay, yes, there's 2 groups of fallen creatures. Let's make that clear. We have the Lucifer, and we think, a third of angels that rebelled, that were cast out of heaven. But now we read in the book of Revelations, there are angels locked up in chains for the day of judgment next to the Euphrates River. So it says angels that are locked up for the day of judgment in chains, in almost a prison, Tartarus, a prison. But evil spirits is something different. They're not angelic beings. So yes, you're right, angels fell, but as I read scripture, Satan was allowed to stay unbound for certain reasons, but his followers were bound for the day of judgment. We read it in 2 Peter 2, the angels that are bound for judgment. So where does evil spirits or demons, daimons, you know where the name demon comes from? It's the Latin or the Greek daimon. And then you have some parents calling their son daimon. It literally means demon. The Greeks believed in 2 layers of deities. They believe in the theos, the gods, the Greek gods. The theos, you know, theo and thea. It means God and goddess. Did you know that? Theo means God and thea means goddess. So they had the theos, and then between the gods and people were daimonian, or spirits. But in any case, that's a Greek vision of how things work. But the evil spirits, I think, where they came from were the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. The ones that died with blood. Yeah. Because God never sanctioned the creation of these beings. And when they died, where did their spirits go? They kept on roaming on this earth until the day of judgment. That's just my theory. Think about it, take it, throw it out. That's where demons come from. And that's one of the reasons demons so desperately wants to possess people, because they want physical bodies back, because they had it at some time. And if you speak to somebody who's an expert on deliverance, they'll tell you that each demon you deal with has a unique personality. It's like dealing with individuals, people with unique personalities. Okay. So, now, the reason, in my opinion, for the flood was the Nephilim. If God says Here comes the difficult part, and either you can say today, oh, that makes sense, or you can say, Heinrich, you're smoking something. If Jesus said the time of Noah will return, and we've just said it can't be just another flood because he promised it won't happen again. What else can it mean except that the concept of the spiritual interbreeding with the physical will happen again in the end times and produce another generation of Nephilim? And why do I personally think it will be possible now in the end times? It's the spiritual realm has rules and regulations and laws. God laid down laws for the spiritual realm to function within. And you know that for angels to get involved in your life, you must be an obedient follower of God, because they can get involved with God's children in certain circumstances. But so also doors have to be opened for evil beings and for demons. And the more secular and evil our communities become, more doors gets opened. And we're going to get to a point in our Western culture, worldwide, but I'm talking now specifically our Western, previously Christian culture, where there's not a door open, there's a highway open. Because of all the sin, secularism, New Ageism, occultism that's happening. And these beings will have the right to manifest freely into our lives. And they will, I believe, the time of the Nephilim will return. Now let's go back to the time that it did exist. I want to share with you another point. And now in the book of Enoch, it says that these watchers, these fallen beings, these fallen angels that were disobedient, interbred with women, and then locked away for punishment by God, also sinned against the kingdom of nature. It says they sinned against the kingdom of nature. So I think it's very possible that as they interbred with female women, there was interbreeding with animals as well. Now, before you say, Heinrich, you are completely losing it. You know that they are in the last few decades busy with experimentation of creating human pig. They call it chimeras. Do you know that it's being done? Do you want to go and Google chimera? And the purpose for this research is they want to create beings from which they can harvest organs. It's medically focused. It's not some weird guy at the basement with lightning creating a Frankenstein. It's scientists in the name of creating harvestable organs for humans, interbreeding pigs with pig eggs and human seed into, and they've been successful. They said that they've never allowed an embryo like that to get to maturity. Still in a research process, but knowing most scientists, I'm sure they've allowed this to go all the way. So the concept of a human-animal interbreeding is not impossible. How would angelic animal interbreeding be impossible? And I'm going to get to the point why I want you to have this in the back of your mind. You might think I'm talking a lot of crazy things this morning, but it's very important. Now, who knows Greek mythology and Roman mythology? Is there half human, half animal creatures in Greek mythology? Many. And I want to venture the following and say that I think some of those rumors are based on some truth. In the time of when the angels in...
Some demons they portray as having animal characteristics as well.
Yes. If some people get possessed, they start barking or slithering like a snake, or they have animal qualities. I believe this time is coming where these things are going to happen again. And you know what? If you're not prepared, you're going to be so awestruck with what you experience. It's going to deceive you and carry you away from the truth. So firstly, I think the Nephilim is going to return. Now, have you noticed that in the last 10, 15 years, there's tremendous lot of movies about superheroes? Have you picked up? How many X-Men movies are there? I can't even keep count. X-Men and all these schools for these talented children that has these awesome, unique powers. There's a generation of young people that's their reference framework. And what do you think if angelic beings or evil beings starts breeding again with humanity? Do you think those offspring are not going to have certain talents or certain supernatural abilities? And these movies are preparing humanity for that. Didn't we read that Jesus said they'll do wonders and miracles? These Christos, these saviors coming? There'll be beings created that will be able to do supernatural things, and people will follow them as their deliverers. I think what's called chimeras is also coming, and supernatural beings. The Nephilim will return. Let's go to the next subject. It says in Matthew 27:51, behold, and it now talks about the moment Jesus died on the cross. Behold, the veil in the temple tore from top to bottom in this earthquake, and the graves opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. And they came out of the graves after Jesus' resurrection. They went into the city and appeared to many. I'll put this down. Now, firstly, we see when Jesus died on the cross, that veil, obviously the veil in the temple tore from top to bottom, symbolic of our access to the Holy of Holies through Christ. But I also think the veil between the living and the dead was shaken. And many saints were resurrected. Is there coming another resurrection when Jesus returned? Yes. Whether you believe in the rapture or only in the revelation of Jesus, there's another massive resurrection coming of the saints, and their bodies will be resurrected. Now, the word rapture, it's not in the English Bible, but in the Greek, we have the word harpazo. 1 Thessalonians 4:16, it says, when Christ will return with the call of an archangel and the trumpet of God, and those who have died in Christ will be resurrected. It's the word harpazo. And harpazo means to collect something that belongs to you with power and authority, and it's a quick retrieval of what is yours. So the resurrection will be a fast process when the bodies are resurrected and united with the spirits. Their spirits for eternal glorified bodies. I always say I don't want to be in a graveyard on that day because there'll just be gravestones flying all over the place. Do you think Satan and the Antichrist don't have an explanation for that in place? Don't you think Satan knows that day is coming when the bodies of the saints will be resurrected? And don't you think he and his institution are preparing for them? Now, if you were in the Antichrist political domain, what possible explanations could you think of to put on CNN 8 o'clock news to explain millions of graves opening? One option, aliens, abduction, yes. And zombies. I know you now think I'm crazy, but why do you think the last 10 years we inundated with zombie movies? Have you picked up how many zombie movies are released? This series that's now on series number 114, The Living Dead, what's it called? The Walking Dead. I don't know, is this about how many series of them are there? The Walking Dead. Say to the average teenager today, a grave opens up and a body stands up. What do you think they're going to say? Zombies. They're not going to say resurrection. They've been prepared for what's coming. So they either say, you know what, we've always joked about zombie movies, but it's actually happening. But don't worry, we're gathering all the zombies up, and they won't bother you. But it's not zombies, it's bodies resurrected for Christ. I watched the first season of The Walking Dead. And a third or fourth program, because I don't mind a scary movie as long as it's not demonic. Then I can enjoy a scary movie up to a point. And there was a scene, and at that scene, I put off the series. That when I say I watched this, it was still on videos. Do you remember videos? 10, 15 years back, I got videos from the video shop. And I saw this, and I just put it off, and I gave it back, and I never watched another episode of The Walking Dead. As the heroes came to a little church in the countryside after this zombie apocalypse. And there were 3 zombies sitting in the church, all in their Sunday best, all tattered and falling apart. And the one joked and said, is this what the Bible means with the resurrection of the dead? And I thought, I hear Satan speak and Satan mock. And I put the video off, and I never watched another episode. But you must understand, and have you noticed and picked up how many alien things are coming through? Have you seen in the last year that they even say that they're starting to confirm that, what's that area in America where seemingly the flying saucer fell in the 1940s? Area 51. I saw an interview on YouTube with a general, American general, who said, no, Area 51 is actually about aliens. It's true. It's not just speculation anymore. They are preparing humanity for the second advent of Christ and what will follow. So they have explanations why millions of people disappear and why graves open. We need to know this, or we're going to be deceived by what's coming. Hopefully you and I will be in heaven after the rapture. But it's important to know. They'll have explanations for the resurrection, and they'll have explanations for the graves opening. Interestingly enough, I watched a video. There are people here that believe in aliens. We won't laugh at you, I promise.
Nobody's going to admit it.
Who have read Ezekiel 1? Have you read Ezekiel 1 with the wheels inside the wheels and the lights? Doesn't it sound like a flying saucer? Ezekiel, living 600 years before the birth of Christ, described a type of angelic beam that has wheels moving in wheels, and everything is filled with eyes or lights. Go and read it. Ezekiel 1 will take you 5 minutes. It sounds like a flying saucer. So if God has angelic beings that look like that, don't you think there might be fallen angelic beings that look like that? I think aliens are just demons. Nothing more. Nothing more. I watched a thing on YouTube about a man that was an atheist, and he loved exploring stories about aliens. And his whole research brought him to Christ, because he said so many people he interviewed that had alien experiences, of aliens appearing or trying to abduct them or whatever. He said the people would say, if they get to a point where they were so frightened that they would instinctively call on the name of Jesus or start praying, those beings will simply withdraw and disappear. That tells me that's demonic beings that react on the name of Jesus. Now let's get... Wonderful. Yeah, so if ever you see an alien, Mary Lou, just start proclaiming Jesus' name. Now let's get to the last part. And here we're going to have a fight. Because I know some of you believe in this. And I don't want to end up making this political. Because this topic has become very political. If you're on the right, sorry? Yes, that's what my nose is. If you're on the right, you don't believe. If you're more on the left, you say this is absolutely true. The point of me raising this subject is not to discuss it, is to tell you what it's going to be abused for. Do you understand where I'm going with this? And that's the concept of climate change. Why are we inundated with stories about climate change? Because one of the major things that will happen in the end time is nature will revolt to evil. And we need an explanation.
And become evil or
Revolt to evil with storms and nature occurrences against the evil. Against it. And that's going to be explained away. We'll say, oh no, it's just all our CO2 emissions, it's climate change. That's the reason for it. Let me give you a few scriptures. It says firstly in Romans 1:20 that Nature. Who created nature? And it says in Romans 1:20 that his divine nature and eternal glory is reflected in nature. God isn't in nature. He's not a pantheistic God like the Hindus. The Hindus believe their gods are part of nature. God is not pantheistic in his nature, but his glory is revealed in nature. And that's why nature revolts against sin. A book I once read talks about, and I thought that was an interesting concept, sin-matter interaction. That spiritual sin actually has an influence on physical matter. Now, if you say that's not possible, who has read the book of Job? How was Job's children killed and his servants killed? By what? By lightning and what's that whirlwind thingy? And tornadoes. So if Satan could use earth forces, manipulate them to an extent to create evil, it's proof that there is a spiritual, physical connection. He could use it. Abuse, obviously, God's nature. When Jesus was on the Sea of Galilee, who's been on the Sea of Galilee? Make me jealous. Anybody? When Jesus was on the Sea of Galilee and there was a storm and they woke him up and says, Lord, don't you care that we are perishing? What did he do when he stood up? He rebuked the storm. Do you rebuke nature or do you rebuke evil? He rebuked the storm as it was an evil presence that used the waves to try and drown him and the disciples. So there's a spiritual, physical interaction, and God's nature rebels, can be abused by Satan, but also rebels against evil. It says in Hosea 4, verse 1 to 3. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, no mercy, and no knowledge of God in the land. They're swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery and the shedding of blood. Therefore, Hosea 4:3, the land has gone into mourning and do not produce food. The land has gone into mourning. Sin affects nature around us. It says in Leviticus 26, verse 20 to 21, and your energy will be spent in vain, for your yield and your hard work will have no benefit, for the land and the trees will bear no fruit. Now, for you that knows Leviticus 26 is a chapter about when you live in sin, the punishment that God promised Israel. Go and read Leviticus 26 about the blessings and the curses God will proclaim on Israel when they live in righteousness or in sin. And one of the things, Leviticus 26, 20 to 21, he said, when you live in sin, your hard work will produce nothing, for the ground and the trees will not bear fruit. There will be a consequence as seen in nature from the sin you commit. And finally, it says, now people blame the heat. We have heat waves. Hey, the earth is increasing in temperature. You know that, hey. It says, and people say it's all the CO2 gas. Who has an orange jumper and sits in the street so nobody can reach their destination? Do you know the Stop Oil protesters? Have you seen them? Have you seen videos about the Stop Oil protesters in Europe? No, they put on little orange vests and they go sit in the streets and they block the traffic in protest against all the petrol and the oil that the cars use. Haven't you seen those videos? Go and Google Stop Oil protesters. It's quite interesting. It says, Revelation 16:9, and the earth will be scorched with great heat, and people will blaspheme God. It's the power of plagues that God is bringing on the earth to burn it with heat and torment. I believe that one of the reasons why this earth will probably end up being scorched by the sun is part of God's judgment on a sinful world. Okay, so let's recap. We're living in the end times. Jesus said the things that happen will deceive even the elect. That means people like you and me has a chance of being deceived if we don't know what's coming. What is coming? The time of Noah. Spiritual, human interbreeding. I believe with all my heart we're going to see it. We're going to see people with special supernatural abilities, like you see in the X movies or type of X movie individuals, and people are going to follow them as heroes. It's coming. There's going to be an explanation. We're going to see explanations of zombies when the rapture or resurrection happen. More and more you're going to hear about aliens. Don't fall for the nonsense. It's just demons. And finally, what you see in nature around you is a result to a great extent of the sin of humanity. Do not be deceived. Stand your ground. Keep your focus on Christ. Live for His glory. And Colossians 1 says, keep your eyes fixed on heaven for the return of Christ. And don't be deceived by false messiahs. Amen. And
I just want to say
amen.
something.
Yes.
So, Daddy, you got your ears in.